All right, everyone. So welcome. This is the first in a series of webinars that's the Charity Insights Canada project is putting on through our Community Education Center. So I welcome you all. My name is Tara McQuinney. I'm a research assistant and postdoctoral fellow with this Charity Insights project. And in case you're not familiar with our project, we've been running weekly surveys with charities across Canada, and we're going into our fourth year. So we survey around approximately 1,000 charities each year, and we publish the survey reports within a few days of charities filling them out, and they're on our website. And we're also working on data dashboards as well with all of our research. So I encourage you to go to our website and check that out. But these series of webinars we're putting them through the Community Education Center, and our hope is to increase data literacy across the nonprofit and charitable sectors. So I just wanted to start today with a land acknowledgement. So I know that we're all coming from different places across Canada today, but we're all living and working on Indigenous lands. And I myself live about 40 kilometers north of Ottawa on the Anishinaabe and Algonquin People's Territory. And as a descendant of white settlers, I recognize that my life, my opportunities, and my perspectives have been shaped by colonial relations. And one of the things that I do in my teaching and in my research to work towards greater reconciliation is to bring in a lens, an anti-racist and decolonizing lens. So I'll just give you a couple examples of how I've done that in my teaching. When I'm teaching social policy courses, we talk about the truth and reconciliation and the calls to action that came out of that commission. We look at, what's been done on some of them, some that are partially done, and the many more where there hasn't been any movement on them. So discussing that, and also discussing movements, Indigenous movements like the Land Back movement, which isn't just about land back, but it's also about self-governments, self-determination, preserving language and culture, and more. So I understand that, that I'm in this learning process, and I'm very grateful to the Indigenous teachings and the labor that Indigenous people have put forth in helping with that learning. And also the Charity Insights Canada project is hosted through Carleton University. So I think Kate's going to put the land acknowledgement for Carleton University in the chat. Thank you, Kate. And we are very grateful today, too, to have a guest speaker. We have Robin joining us from Mass Culture. And Robin, I'll just invite you to introduce yourself to the group.
Thanks, Tara. Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Sokolowski. My pronouns are she, her, and I am joining you from Toronto, Takaranto on Treaty 13 territory. My day job is being the Director of Programs and Research for a wonderful national arts organization called Mass Culture. And really happy to be here with all of you today. And it's a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, as I know some of you know, because I can see some familiar faces. Hello, Jerry and Katie, and yeah. So I guess back over to you, Tara.
All right, thanks. And just before we get started, I just wanted to do a couple housekeeping things. So we are recording this session today, and we will be posting it. We'll be sharing it with you via email, but also posting it on our website for future viewing and sharing it on YouTube as well. And we will there's closed captioning available. You'll see that in your settings in English today for the webinar. Once we post it on YouTube, there will be French subtitles available to you as well. And so since we're recording, feel free to participate as you're comfortable with your video on or off. I'll be asking people to post responses to questions, discussion questions that we bring up in the chat. We'll also be posting extra resources in the chat. So I just encourage you to interact as you're comfortable. And if you want to raise your hand and ask a question, then that's great as well. Okay, so we'll get started. So what are we covering in this webinar today? Well, we really wanted to start with sort of, something for everyone, but really starting at a beginner level. So if you have no experience with data at all, that's great. I'm glad that you're here, and I hope that the webinar today will be helpful. I'm going to start with sort of an introductory to working with data that's very specific for nonprofits and charities. And we're going to go over the definition of data. We're going to throw in some key terms in there and explain them, talk about why data matters to nonprofits and charities, and also to give sort of a brief introduction to some big topics, but considering ethics and DEI in your approach to working with data. And then Robin will be giving us an overview of the learning framework for impact measurement, and with a focus in on how to formulate research questions, and that will be a very interactive session. So let's get started. So the first thing is I would just put your responses in the chat. What comes to mind when you hear the word data? Oh, information and numbers. Yes. Numbers and more numbers. Information, evidence. This is great. Surveys. Excel. A lot of us work with spreadsheets. Yeah. Stories. Insights. We're branching out here. Starting point. Nice. Lived experience. Confusion. Yes, I feel that sometimes too. Charts, for sure. Oh, a story waiting to be told. I like that one. The stuff you collect before you interpret it. Accountability. Language is data. Yep. Information, stories, evidence, decisions, analytics. Well, these are all great responses. Oh, we have a little Jeff too. Nice. Well, these are great responses. So I think, and that, I think it, oh, sorry. I hit something on here that it's now repeating what I'm saying. Okay. All right, it stopped doing that. Can everyone still hear me? Kate?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I started getting an echo for a second there. So I think that all of those responses really captures, the definition of data. Like, we often think about, the first thing we think about is numbers and information, and those were the first to come up. But data is really very broad. And as a simple definition, it's facts or values that can be measured or described. And so that includes numbers, but also text, images. I know people mentioned stories. And being so broad, data is really something that can be found everywhere. And although we often rely on intuition for solving problems, it's really data that gives us the ability to make more informed decisions. And we saw the word information, so I really love this. I think this pyramid here really shows how data is kind of like the foundation of that journey towards knowledge and wisdom. So this is called the DIKW pyramid, and in our extra resources, we have a whole little video on this. But just to briefly introduce you, so data is our raw facts and values, and then information is when we take that data and we process it and we organize it and we find we really get meaning and context from the data. And then knowledge is when we take that information and and we analyze it, we interpret it, and we apply it to solve problems. And then over time, through gathering knowledge and our experience, over time we gain a deeper insight, which is wisdom. So data kind of forms the basis of all of that. And in the academic world, but you probably may have heard these terms before, but there's different types of data. So when we talked about numbers, quantitative data is the data that is expressed as numbers. So this is data that, when we ask questions like how much or how many or to what degree, we're looking at quantitative data. And examples, these are just a few examples. I'm sure you can think of more ways that quantitative data is collected in nonprofits and charities, but you might have program participation rates, donation amounts, age, if you're collecting the age or income level of participants. Program costs is another example of quantitative data. And then on the other side, we have qualitative data, which really is anything that's non-numerical, which is a lot of different types of data. Some of them you mentioned, stories. So, examples can include, focus group discussions about program experiences, case notes, observations of staff, photos, videos, audio. Qualitative data really gives us the kind of story behind the meaning of numbers or of what's going on. So if quantitative data tells us what is happening, qualitative data can really help us to start to see why things are happening. And strong decision making often combines both. So one example of combining quantitative and qualitative data is if we take, say we have a nonprofit that's providing counseling programs for youth. And we see that we've gathered some numerical data. We had 124 who participated. 82% showed improvement on a standardized wellness scale. And we had 315 counseling sessions. So this shows that there is something happening here, that the program is providing some good outcomes. But really, when we get into the qualitative data, we start to understand things a bit more. So if we did focus groups with the youth and heard, well, I finally trust an adult who listens without judgment, and it helped that a counselor shared lived experience like mine. So we're starting to understand why the program might be more successful. And also, we heard that some youth wanted longer sessions. So we're hearing about maybe some unmet needs through the program. So all of this can really help guide the program design and also like decisions around staffing as well. So there are also, when we think about nonprofits and charities, some types of data that's collected by nonprofits and charities. Well, think about administrative data, right? Everyone collects administrative data around salaries, expenses, financial transactions, different things like that. Program data, so your program services, interventions, what are the outputs and outcomes that are happening for that program, and how is it being effective for the community? And impact data as well. So what are sort of the long-term effects? What's happening, from the programs and services and interventions? And I think impact is one aspect of data that Robin will be looking at for our example today. So why does data matter to nonprofits and charities? Well, I think it matters for many different reasons, but it improves decision making. So, it helps guide program design, resource allocation, strategic planning. It can support monitoring and evaluation. So of your programs, what is the effect that the programs and services are having on the community? It enhances accountability. So accountability to funders, other stakeholders, to community members as well. And that helps to increase, transparency as well. And supporting fundraising efforts. So we can take, evidence-based insights and when you're applying for grants or reporting to funders, you can use those as well. And some nonprofits and charities use insights from data to inform, where they focus their fundraising efforts as well. So this is not an exhaustive list, but it certainly outlines how data is very important to nonprofits and charities. So another little discussion. So what is one example of data that you're aware of that your organization already collects? And how is your organization using this data? You just reply. And if you're not currently with an organization, I know we had some students, maybe you were in the past, or you could share an experience about data that you've seen used in the nonprofit sector. Oh, here we go. So program participants, volunteer hours, yeah. Giving history donations to stewards the donors, thanking them, renewing, etc. Okay. So being able to say thank you to those who donate. Collects data on participants in our program across all agencies. Number of inquiries about volunteer placements. Visitor attendance. Number of people who visit an exhibition. We report on this to the community and the funders as a metric of reach and relevance. Okay. Donor surveys, personal surveys. I'm seeing some people are just posting the data and not how it's being used, and that's fine. Maybe maybe there's some cases where we're collecting and we don't know, or maybe the data is not being used. So program information to support impact reports to donors. So lots of stuff about fundraising. Socio-demographic data about clients and families. Wait times to access programs. You can let people know. Maybe use those in the funding applications too, to shorten those wait times. Collect data on food bank users, how many appointments in a week, how many members of the household, and we use it to show the increase in visits to our food bank. Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about the increase in visits to food banks. Volunteer Toronto, we collect data on how many volunteers were engaged by 600 plus nonprofits in Toronto. We then use that data to map volunteer engagement across the city. All right. Cost per outcome. So program exit survey data. That's good to get insights into how to improve on program design. Results of fundraising activities. Yep. So best practices to help you plan for, we're planning for fundraising events. Performance data, volumes, units of service. So it's required by the funder. Yeah, often we're collecting data to report on funding for sure. Grants for grant application and time allocation. We're reporting to all stakeholders. Or how to support donors with our foundation and what their interests are. We use collected data in a lot of our more grant applications. Used to assess future granting as well, so making those decisions. Yeah, and to increase knowledge and skills to show capacity building and outcomes to funders. Determining strategic planning is in there too. Okay, and someone's looking at impact reporting, so they're asking for feedback based on what the organization said they would do versus what they actually did and were successful. Okay, so your private foundation. Great. And accessing equity for funding micro projects led by volunteers. Well, that's wonderful. So we see there's lots of different ways just in that little discussion there about how data is useful. So I know that there's also, sorry, I'm moving things around on my screen as I do. I just maximize the chat. So that's minimized now. So I want to we need to consider data ethics as well. And I know this is a really big topic and we're just here today to introduce. But one of the things that I really love this quote, and this resource is available in the extra resources, the Informing Change Data Ethics Guidebook. But I think this quote really speaks to how we can't think of data as something abstract, right? Like it's always coming from people and from groups of people, and therefore we need to treat it respectfully as we would treat people. So we think about data instead of something abstract. It's the words, thoughts, feelings, expressions, interactions, and contributions from individual people. And, it's just to give a few examples, because of course this is going to look different depending on what the project is or the way that what data you're working with or trying to collect. But if you're collecting data, it's very important to use what you're collecting. We don't want to overburden communities or people in constantly sharing, because they are sharing their time, their experiences, and their thoughts. And so it's important when we are collecting that we know what the goal is and how we're going to use that data. And then like when we're you really want to have clear, another thing is consent, right? Having clear, consent so that people know why we're collecting the data, how it's going to be used, how it's going to be shared. Like if there's any chance that you won't be able to share the data anonymously, is that clearly laid out? And do we understand the ramifications of that? And maybe we shouldn't be sharing that data then. So those are things, different ethical things that may be considered. And tying closely into, well, as a part of ethics, we also consider diversity, equity, and inclusion as well. So just as data is not abstract, it's also never neutral. So we are the ones, collecting, interpreting, analyzing, and making all of these decisions, and our own assumptions, values, and biases are going to be involved in there. So we need to be intentional about using a DEI lens so that we don't unintentionally, exclude communities, misrepresent findings, or make inequitable decisions or outcomes from that. And I think that really reflects back to that data, is data comes from people, and people are very diverse. There is no one size fits all answer. What we do is what I think about in my social work is that reflective practice, right? So doing your research, discussing with your colleagues, and people, the community of people that you're researching as well, whenever you can, including them in those decisions as well. Some examples around DEI would be like if you were taking so if you're sampling, from the community, is it representative of those that you're trying to, of those that you're gathering data from? So like if you did an online survey, who might be excluded from that, right? Those who have less access to online, and so how your methods are set up. Is there anyone that might be excluded from that? If you're asking questions about race and gender, how are you doing that? Is it, are people self-identifying? If you have categories, which categories are you using? And then, who might be excluded as well from that? If you're analyzing and you're reporting on an average, are there different groups, inside the community you're looking at that average might look different for them? And so are you reporting on that? And do you have, an adequate sample? So there's lots of different ways that we would consider diversity, equity, inclusion, and ethics as well. And I encourage you to check out the extra resources really as a starting point for looking into this and researching it, because it's kind of like an ongoing process. And then I just wanted to mention one more thing that's really important when it comes to working with data is acknowledging the difference between correlation and causation. So correlation is when two things happen at the same time. So if we take, for an example, a youth tutoring program, and we've seen that youth who come to our tutoring program do better on their test scores, right? So we see those things happening at the same time. And we might jump to an assumption that, well, our tutoring program helps students improve their grades, but there might be other things going on there, right? So what we're seeing is a correlation, that these things are moving together. But does that actually mean that one is causing the other? And other things that could be happening is that youth that are joining the tutoring program are ones who are already really highly motivated to study, and perhaps they would have gotten better grades anyway than those who are not in the program. Maybe staff are recommending the program to students that are higher performing. So there could be other things going on. And it's just important to remember that, because if we conflate correlation with causation, then that can lead to promoting programs that don't actually work, misinterpreting needs, forwarding harmful narratives, or just investing in the wrong solutions as well. So after all of that, I just wanted to take a little poll and see how we're all feeling about data right now. So I'm going to share that, and if you want to respond. And we're going to take time for questions after Robin's up next, and then we'll take time for questions after that.
Amazing. Well, people are filling out the poll, Tara.
Mhm.
I want to let you know that there is a question in the Q&A
Ooh,
section
okay.
that Robin, I think you might have some examples from Mass Culture's DNA project, but
Okay.
I just wanted to let you know that there is one question waiting there in Q&A.
And
Oh,
unfortunately,
people
Tara,
can't vote.
people, yeah, yeah,
People
you have to
can't vote.
relaunch.
Okay.
There you
Um,
go.
oh,
No,
okay. How's that?
no,
No. Okay, let's try this again. So polls. Okay. Is it up now? There we go. Oh, wait. Okay, it's
yeah.
working. Sorry, I think I got a little excited and I hit share results too fast. What was the question in the chat, Kate? Do you know? Because I
Sure. I'm curious about how to give the data back to a person or community where it came from, if that's what they want, especially with diverse and Indigenous folks. Could you share any thoughts or experiences about this? So, this came in right after your slide about data ethics and data comes from people, and we have to consider that in the work that we do, in especially when you're surveying individuals. So I'll leave that for after Robin's part of the presentation.
okay. All right. So right now we have, let's see, 63 out of 75. Looks like we're holding steady out there, so. Did I hit the share button? Can you guys see that? It's 6%. Well, we have a few folks that are still feeling kind of scared about data, and that's totally fair. I still feel that way sometimes, and I've been working with it for a long time. Well, we got 22% says data feels manageable, and 62% who are excited, and 10% where it's still confusing. Yeah. So, like I said, there's extra resources. This is just, a brief introduction and start of what is a continual kind of learning process. So, all right. So on that, I will pass it on to Robin.
Great. I think
Okay.
I just need you to stop
Is it
sharing.
is it gone?
Yeah.
Okay. And
Just
yes.
stop sharing.
Yeah.
All right. So, hi, everyone. I know there were some folks that came a little bit more into the hour. So, for those who I haven't met yet, my name is Robin Sokolowski, and you'll get to know all about me and the organization I work with in the next little bit. And I'm hoping to get to know some of you because, as it was shared at the top of the meeting, this is participatory. So, mass culture, for those of you who have not become acquainted with us yet, we are a national charitable support organizations that are in service to the arts community specifically. However, I feel a lot of the work that we do, especially through our DNA, data narratives for the arts initiative, a lot of it's transferable to the nonprofit community at large. We're learning a lot from folks outside of the arts community. So I'm really looking forward to this next little bit. And thank you to Charity Insights Canada for inviting me to take part in this inaugural series session for the series. So yeah, let's get right into it. So I think it's important to talk a little bit about how we are approaching this. And I'm just gonna see if I can click. So this is how Mass Culture has been working with arts organizations. We have a data fellowship program that really provides a bit of a roadmap on how to take arts organizations throughout this process of building out a data strategy. So um, it runs from left to right, but as I've said in the past, and some of you have heard me say this, you have a tendency to jump around because as human beings, we aren't as organized in our minds from left to right, even though that's how we like to see things. So we had an artist, Harmeet Rael, design this framework for us. However, it's also available in an Excel spreadsheet. And Kate, if you could be so kind to add the link to our website where you can download both the artistic version and the Excel version, then please do so.
No problem.
So we start, pardon me?
Sorry,
No?
no problem. Here it goes.
Okay, thanks, Kate. All right, so it goes from understanding what areas of impact you want to learn from. And this is very much, we've designed it as a learning and evaluation framework because we want to really support arts organizations and arts workers in doing this work because it matters to them, not for reporting and compliance reasons. So, what are the areas of impact that you really care about moving towards describing how those emerged, how you would describe them, and then developing questions, indicators, collection mechanisms on how you're going to go about understanding the responses to those questions, along with the engagement and analysis piece and the sharing of impact. And I wanted to go through this because I think actually it responds to the question that was in the chat that Kate read out. That one strategy or of to that response is that you are intentional all the way from every single one of these columns and how you are engaging community and the folks who you are doing the research for and with and wanting to understand. So there are multiple opportunities here to engage folks in even understanding what your areas of impact are within your organization or group or collective that you are wanting to learn from. You can also, I think a lot of us, and I saw this come up in the Zoom chat, thinking about surveys, but I think that there's always a hesitancy on what the questions are that you should be asking. And so it's a good exercise potentially to bring folks who you might be asking the questions of to engage them in some survey design question exercise. And then also always having the commitment of those who are contributing their time and investing their time in providing responses to your questions, committing to being able to share that information back with them in whatever way or a multitude of different ways. We tend to like to be multimodal. I love using digital um, canvases. So we tend to collect all the insights anonymously and share them back with those who contributed. And then there's an opportunity there for people to even provide further information because they can add additional sticky notes or what have you. The more creative and for me, the more artistic you can be in these different areas throughout this learning framework is absolutely essential. However, the reason why we're here today and what we wanted to talk to you about is offers a great roadmap, but you need a North Star in order to move forward through this with confidence and also so you don't go off into multiple different tangents. And so that North Star is the research question. We have experienced by working with a lot of arts organizations that there's a tendency to just want to jump straight to the data. What data do we have? What can we use? But I encourage you to spend some time first thinking about what you even want to ask of the data before jumping into the copious amount of work of working with your data. Um, because you want it to be intentional and you want to be guided by what you're curious and want to learn about. And the reality is we're all sitting on a lot of data already, so it can feel overwhelming. So having that North Star research question is absolutely paramount in order to guide through a process like this effectively. And I always love this quote, which is I'm so appreciative that the artist included it here at the bottom, that measure affects what you do. If you don't measure the right thing, you don't do the right thing. So it's good to be mindful of that, especially I know this is true of many other subsectors in the non-for-profit, but it's definitely in the arts. Given our dependency on public funding, we tend to respond to other people's questions, such as funders, and aren't really doing the work that we need to do of understanding the questions we want to ask of ourselves. So that is a huge part of this, and it's a practice, it's a muscle you have to constantly work because developing a question, a research question, can feel daunting, and people have a tendency to want to get it absolutely right the first time. So, I think going into this, I want to jump right into the participatory part. And here are two questions, and I'm very curious to hear from you. Which one of these questions feel more meaningful to you? You can answer to the questions here. Which question gives you something you can actually learn from, and what makes one stronger? So you can put A, B, and then your reasoning in the chat. That would be awesome. I'm just gonna try and scroll over so I can see the responses. Let's see. There you are. Okay. Yeah. B, B, B. It's overwhelmingly B. And is there any reason why you think one is more stronger than the other before I go into my own rationale? Yeah, smart. Um, yeah, so making sure it's measurable, making sure that you want to, yeah, it guides responders, I think is really important. Um, it gives you something that I think one the reasons that it's good is that B doesn't allow a respondent to just say yes or no, which is, I think, very important, especially when, and I know there are some folks here because I saw it in the chat, are interested in understanding what kind of impact their work has. It's important to go a little bit deeper. Yeah, specific metrics. Um, it is an open-ended question, but it does have another thing that it offers is it has a very specific. It's under what conditions, and I think it also has a tendency. This question B offers and invites equity. I think it also identifies who you're asking the question about, and I also think it offers. A sense of how this question will be asked, which is over time. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Trisha. I couldn't agree more. I think that language is sometimes tricky. This is something that comes up with um, it comes up quite a bit when doing these types of exercises. And so that's why this idea of developing a research question should be framed as an exercise, and you should workshop it. I think that one thing that we found is that folks want to get the question right the very first time, but you don't know until you know whether the question is going to be effective or not and whether it needs to be tweaked. But I encourage you to collaboratively work with other folks to design a question that feels right, that you feel like you can learn from, so that you can then move forward and build out the rest of the framework that I just shared. Yeah. How does it invite equity? So, I think well, and I also want you to keep in mind that this is the overarching question. So it offers space for you to get a little bit more focused in the questions that you want to ask specifically. Um, and so this isn't just the one question that you're going to use this is the one question you're going to use to inform the overall, but then it allows space for you to kind of dive a little bit deeper. Whereas the letter A1, are we increasing belonging, doesn't offer enough, I think, traction and room and understanding for there to be offerings of how you might go about understanding what you would like to know and make it a little bit more inviting to a whole gamut of different folks in how you want to ask questions. I just think that B, although not perfect, offers a little bit more range. But we can certainly have uh, more conversation about that later. I want to get into a little bit, if it'll let me do. Yeah. So some of this, which I think responds to some of the questions that are popping up as to why this work is important. So we are guided by these three kind of pillars that really to really make sense of why we do the work that we do in supporting arts organizations specifically, in undergoing this process and applying some time to it. So I think for far too long, practitioners of nonprofits have been asked to provide data that doesn't match up with what they need to learn in order to improve outcomes. So one of the things to be mindful of, and that I think that this process offers, is that this is field-led data building. So as I said, by engaging different folks at different aspects of the learning framework, it allows you to work with people on the ground who you're already working with to design a data strategy with them. And I think by doing that, it helps more clearly define what your research question is. You are the ones that are closest to the people that you are working with. Therefore, it's important for nonprofits themselves to invest in doing this work. I think we have a tendency to hire consultants or folks outside of our organizations to help us do this, which is important and necessary to help support this work in terms of capacity, but it's important for you to be engaged with it yourself. So instead of just handing it off, if you're working with someone else, you should be really focused on the designing of everything from the larger research question to the actual questions themselves. Secondly, capacity building for learning, not and adaptation, not just reporting. This is something I was alluding to before. I think we have a tendency to be responding to other people's questions, such as funders, whereas when I really think that what's important is that we are asking and taking the time needed to understand what we want to learn from our work so that we can better adapt and reflect and then make the changes that are needed so that we're meeting the people or the initiatives or the mission that we are attempting to strive for. And the third one, which I saw referenced in the questions, is equity-centered learning. So integrating lived experience and community voice into data and evaluation. So this whole framework is an opportunity to, as I said, engage folks at different points throughout the entire process. Because I think conventionally, what we have often done is we involve people potentially at the beginning to let them know that we're doing this, and then we share the results at the end with maybe an offering to ask them to either do interviews, focus groups, or fill out a survey in between. But there are multiple different ways and creative and dynamic ways to engage folks in this process. So I think by bringing in a multitude of different voices who can have a say in what questions you're asking, how you're asking them, and how you're sharing it back, certainly speaks to, I think, equity-centered learning. All right. So the next part is over to you. So there is a worksheet that Mass Culture has that hopefully, Kate, you can share the link to it so you can practice this after the fact if you like. But what I want you to kind of spend your own time doing, you don't need to put this in the Zoom chat, just if you have a pen and paper in front of you, respond to the end of this question. I'll give you maybe a minute to do so. So through our work, we hope to contribute to. So I'll give you a moment to do that.
Robin, while people are answering or finishing that statement, there's a question. Is this the same as an organization's vision or purpose?
Well, maybe we'll keep that until the end so that we can, I don't want to distract folks from doing this, but we can move on because I know we don't have a whole lot of time. And this is just a taste. So obviously, if we were doing this work, um, we would be spending a whole lot more time than 30 minutes doing it. But there you go. So hopefully you had a chance to fill out the end part of that sentence because now what I want you to do is what are you genuinely curious about when you think about that impact that you're trying to make or the change or the work that you're trying to do to influence uh, I assume public good and good things being nonprofits. And these can be quick and dirty. They just write down a few ideas, a few messy questions. Yeah, you can. Sometimes it helps to if you're stuck to start with "I wonder." Dot dot dot. So I'll give you another minute to do that. All right. So I'm sure you're not completely finished, but I think that to a certain degree, there's a good thing about having to do this rapidly because you don't have a whole lot of time to question yourself and ask. You're just writing things down, hopefully. So I want you to be able to look at least one of the questions you wrote down in response to this. And let's see here. These are filters to help sharpen those questions. So when you look at maybe pick one of the questions you wrote down, for whom is it for or about? In what context are you asking the question? Can you see yourself, who you'd be asking, where you'd be asking it, what information you want to learn from about it? Um, what kind of change are you hoping to learn or understand by asking the question? What are you wanting to track, basically? What might influence it? Obviously, there are lots of different factors. Whereas if you ask this question in a certain situation, you might get a different response than if you were to ask it in another one. And over what time frame would you want to ask this question? Would you want to ask it immediately during a program while it's happening? Would you want to ask it maybe a couple months out or a year? So these are the different filters that you can use to kind of sharpen the questions that you're developing. Um, so moving on from there, I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about indicators because indicators go kind of hand in hand in my mind with questions. And I think indicators are a good opportunity to test the strength of the questions that you're trying to ask. So you have the overarching question that you want to help guide you through that learning framework. But then once you use that larger question, have a chance to bring maybe through a board retreat or bring your staff together to have a conversation about that, to really like fine tune what that research question is. You'll want to tease out what specific impact areas, and I would encourage you not to use more than three, because obviously the more you come up with, the more work you're giving yourself. And then from designing those impact areas, like understanding a sense of belonging or enhancing a sense of belonging, and then what are the questions you can ask to understand whether or not your programs, for example, are offering a sense of belonging. You'll want to develop some indicators which are really just benchmarks, and they're just measurable signs of progress toward the intended changes you or your organization is striving to make. So it helps you understand and test, as I said, the questions that you're creating, because if you aren't able to come up with some indicators to in support of that question, then you might have to go back to the drawing board and create a new question. So I thought that it might be a good test for you again to do on your own, to take one of those questions that you developed on your piece of paper and come up with one qualitative indicator. So, as Tara was sharing earlier on, like a story, a perception, experience, a testimonial, and one quantitative indicator, so as a number, a percentage, to understand the question. So I created an example here for you of 8 different indicators in response to this larger overarching research question. The ones in blue are qualitative and the ones in pink are quantitative. So I wanted to give you just, I guess, another minute to maybe see if you can come up with indicators to help support a question that you would want to ask. All right. Given the time, I want to make sure we continue through this. And I just wanted to quickly also share with you. So one tool that mass culture uses is called a ripple map. And it helps us both organize, but then also come up with a sharing device of how we will share the data that we're collecting outwardly to the public. It also gives you, so what I've done here is I've plotted all of the indicators that I want to have responses to and when I want to have responses to them. Because then sometimes, as I said, you don't necessarily want to work through that learning framework from left to right. Sometimes it's easier to come up with the indicators and plot them out to help you shape what questions you want to ask. So you can see this trajectory of from understanding this indicator right off the bat to moving towards these other indicators over time. Because I think when some people think of longitudinal research, they think about asking the same question year after year, which is a way of capturing longitudinal information. But if you're trying to understand a particular learning inquiry or an impact area, then you might want to have a sequence of questions that you want to build outwards. So yeah. So I just wanted to provide an example of why it's so important for your own self to build out the questions and the indicators that you want to put forward before jumping straight into the data. So yeah, I think that one other last slide that I wanted to share before we have a bit of time for questions is this is an example on Mass Culture's website if you're curious of how we have used the ripple map. So by collecting the responses of the questions and indicators that we plotted out, we have these ripple maps on our website with audio excerpts of the folks that we interviewed. So you can hear the original experience, transitional, the evaluating change, different points in the experience that we had with folks that we had worked with, and we wanted to evaluate and understand if the work that we were doing was affecting them or not. So this is how we are transparent and share the information of the activities that we offer. So yeah, I think I will leave it there. Here's my contact information if you want to get in touch and talk a little bit more about this particular area specifically, or if you want to talk about the learning framework overall. But yeah, I'm sure there are some questions. So I will stop sharing and pass it back over to Dara.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Robin. Yeah, so we have a few minutes now, and also, at 2 o'clock we'll stop recording, but stay on for a few extra minutes if we can't get to all the questions. So you can post them in the chat or raise your hand.
There was that one question about vision, Kate. Are you able to?
Sure, I'll pull that up. And while you were showing that last image of the ripple map, you got I don't know if you could see it, Robin, but you got so much love about how impressive that was. I think you kind of addressed this question about how you give the data back to a person or a community. Was that the question you're talking about, or were you talking about one that was sort of halfway through?
Halfway through one about vision.
Okay,
Oh,
I'll find it.
okay, but also if people want to unmute and ask anything. Nadia, I think you have a few questions in here, so Jerry, go ahead.
I think one of the questions was about equity. How does this data approach contribute to equity, developing equity in your organization?
So, as I said before, and I'm happy to reinforce this, I can't stress how important it is to intentionally find ways of engaging folks, which also means like one of mass culture's principles is decent work. So when entering into this work, you have to have, I think, a bit of a budget to pay people for their time. But then also information is also a tremendous resource. So you might be using it for a purpose, but the people that you're working with and asking responses of may also see value in utilizing that information as well. I think that going back to what Tara was saying about ethics is really important. So having a really clear consent form on what the information is being used for, I think is really important. I also think that when you're designing your questions, you have to ask yourself, why am I asking this question and what am I going to use the information for? Because you don't want to waste people's time and you don't want to just ask a question for the sake of asking. I think that far too often we're asking questions around demographics and not really using that information in any way that is meaningful. So you have to ask yourself, why am I collecting this type of information and how will I use it and how am I going to share with people how I'm using it and share back with them. I think those all speak to principles around equity that I think are important to think about when undergoing a process like this. But yeah, I'm not sure if you have any other responses to that, Tara.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it's interesting about the compensation because I know in academia there's the ethics boards are always a bit, reluctant to provide, compensation. So it has to be something that's not too large either. They want people to participate, but that's academic research. So I mean you have to look at your organization and what you're doing. But as someone coming from a social work background, we're like, yes, but we're asking people to come and their time and their effort, so one of the things that I did too, and I did my own research, was to have childcare available as well during the session. We ran it out of an early years center. So we were able to do that. But yeah, just thinking about that, the access, right, and the barriers that it might be, like I said, and who might not be participating because they have, yeah, those barriers. So compensation in different ways can speak to that.
Okay,
There's
so
some,
there's some
no,
great
go ahead.
questions. So the one that you were asking about, Robin, is how do you tie your data to the organization's mission or vision?
So I personally think, and just so I know we're at time, but I'm happy to stay for like an extra 7 minutes or whatever. So if you can stay too, amazing. But I think that by undergoing this process of building out a data strategy, it makes you question your mission and vision. Are you meeting your mission and vision? Are they tied together? Are you way off on a tangent over here? Because we have a tendency to do that, where when an organization starts, they think, okay, we need a mission, vision, and values. And then all of a sudden you ignore that and move away from it. It's a good way of understanding whether or not you're still on track, or if you, like so many organizations, even like certainly myself included, there's a lot of mission creep. And we're always chasing money. But I think this is a good opportunity to take pause and ask yourself, are these connected? Is this data strategy serving our mission and vision? And if it's not, then I think you need to go through that exercise of reviewing and updating that for sure. Hopefully that responds.
Yeah, that's great. I think just before we start answering more questions, Kate, can you put the feedback survey? If folks are jumping off, we have a short feedback survey. If you have a minute to fill that out, that would be great. It's just on your perception of the webinar today. So, and help guide us in as we're developing more throughout the year.
And we're going to send it over email as well. So
We will,
don't
yeah.
worry, you will receive it.
You will receive it, yeah.
There's this
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's this really great question by Natalie about the realistic, what could minimum resource commitment for small nonprofits to do this work well? It's a question that comes up so often because we work with with organizations that normally have a staff of one or volunteers, and it's so. Organizations like Mass Culture that operate as capacity builders to help support organizations through this. And our data fellowship program is we pay the data coach to work with the organization. Yes, there's a time commitment to all this work. There's no way around that. But I think in the long run, you'll find that it helps serve you in building out your strategic plan, which so many of us have to sit down and do, helps with building a case for support. So by committing some time to doing this work, you'll find that it actually supports you and creates greater efficiencies in other ways. I can't. I think it's so important to kind of obviously you have to prioritize what's important within your work, day-to-day work to do internally. I think another trick is not just letting this sit all with one staff person. If you have a staff larger than one, kind of distributing it so that and acknowledging that everyone touches data in one way or another and needs to be engaged in this process is really important. So I think that there are definitely some capacity building techniques and strategies that I'm happy to talk to anyone with after the fact, because I think that is a really important piece to all of this.
Yeah, and I mean, you're talking about impact measurement, but we use data in many different ways as well. And I just want to say that we have some upcoming webinars as well, on how to use spreadsheets, so Excel and Google Sheets. And so sometimes, it's just about we're collecting certain data. How are we storing it? How are we sharing it? But setting up the basics of using spreadsheets so that if you do continue the data journey and you want to do more involved things, that you have some good practices around the use of spreadsheets. So I can say that there's, that data literacy is important, I think in every single nonprofit, for many different reasons. Yeah.
The questions that are just coming up, I think a quick win, something that I think is a good practice, because as I said, all of this takes practice. Pick one question you want to ask yourself put it on a sticky note, put it on your computer, and I don't know, at the end of the week or at the end of every day, ask yourself that question and then maybe jot down some of the responses to it. I think that is a quick win and also a great way of really starting to flex those muscles and doing some of this work and understanding whether it's a question you are learning from or not. So I would say that is a quick win. All right.
Very good. Okay. So I'll just share my screen again quickly. I had one more. I just wanted to do a small, oh great, it went to the beginning. Let's go back to the end. Oh. Okay, well, anyway, I'll just read off what was on that slide because it didn't pick up from where it was. But yeah, like I said, we have upcoming workshops this year. They'll be posted really soon. The next two will be back to back, week after week on spreadsheets, but we're doing workshops on data visualizations, how to read them, how to make start off and from a beginner level of building data visualizations. We have one on storytelling, and we have one on how to read CICP survey reports and use our data dashboards. And in that, just some sort of tips on analyzing survey data. And we'll probably have more as well throughout the year. So I encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn to find out more information about the CICP project. And Robin, I want to thank you again. That was wonderful, and for coming and joining us, and to all of you for joining us today. So, all right. Okay. Kate, we can probably, oh,